Prison is designed to break one's spirit. The authorities attempt to exploit every weakness, demolish every initiative, negate all signs of individuality. This quote is from Nelson Mandela's autobiography, in which he recounts his experiences of being in prison as an anti-apartheid activist. We can relate these feelings of feeling controlled by an authority group for many oppressed groups that have been colonized or controlled in the past. Good afternoon, my name is Aussie Ozier, and I'll be talking about Native American culture and the environment. We can compare this to how colonization of settlers has impacted the Native American culture, which was once at its core symbiotic with nature. Through extensive research, this leads me to the question, to what extent has the symbiotic relationship between indigenous cultures in the United States and the environment been impacted post-settler colonization in the late 1800s and early 1900s? To understand this question, we need to understand three things. First, Native American culture and what they value to their core. Second, the impacts of settler colonization on this culture, and the harm of diminishing Native Americans on the environment. First, Native American culture inherently has deep reverence for nature. That means all their practices and values and cultural traditions are centered around respecting nature and utilizing their environment wisely. This is put in a sentence. This is summarized well in a sentence in a speech by Chief Seattle talking about how Native Americans value their land, where he states, "The earth is our mother. The earth does not belong to man, man belongs to the earth." And this holds the ideas that many Native Americans felt like the earth was something to be respected rather than to conquer, and this is shown in many of their practices. For example, we see the buffalo, which was really important to many plains tribes, such as the Cheyenne, and how they used every single part of the buffalo. We can see various arrows pointing to the hair, beard, tongue, skull, brains, and many parts of the buffalo, so that every buffalo that they hunted was used to its fullest extent. Even the feces of the buffalo was used for fuel, and that just shows how well they utilized every resource they had to avoid any unnecessary waste. A reason that many Native American cultures emphasize this was because they practiced animism. And this assigns spirits to beings such as plants, animals, and even inanimate objects such as mountains or rocks or any part of the physical earth they live on. They even attributed a trait called the Three Sisters to the plants they grow, which is corn, bean, and squash, which they felt the Three Sisters was a gift to them. And growing these plants was a treasure, so they did it wisely to sustain it and be able to practice it for as long as they could without wasting any resources. However, when white settlers started moving to the environment the natives lived in, we can see clear damage that it has done to the culture and therefore hurting the environment. We can see in this painting called American Progress by John Gast the ideals that white Americans had at the time that were opposing to those of Native Americans. This represents manifest destiny and how they believed in moving westward while chasing out the Native Americans. And I'll be focusing on that part of the painting where they're chasing out Native Americans and the buffalo, and that shows how they're erasing the culture that was symbiotic with the environment and then hurting it with the new stuff they bring in. During this time period, they knew that buffalo was used as a heavy resource for Native Americans, but they started hunting this resource and pushed it to depletion. Here we see a huge mound of buffalo skulls, and these are some of those that have been hunted at the time to purposely hurt Native Americans and exploit the environment. Here we see that prior to colonization, or when it was still in its early time in the 1500s, there's 45 million bisons in the Americans in the 1500s prior to European settlement. But the species nearly went extinct here to far less than 10,000 in 1884, when there was only 325 bison remaining. And through efforts, they have been brought up again later. But this is a huge decline because of people depleting the natural resources and the disrespect to the culture that once valued them. Another reason that settler colonization has hurt the environment is because of the industrialization in times such as the Gilded Age, where the United States was growing up economically, but it was also hurting its environment because of many factories burning fossil fuels such as coal and hurt the environment. We can see here, this graph from the World Resources Institute shows carbon emission rise from the US in gigatons. We can see here a rise from the 1850s, and then it starts increasing more in the late 1800s to the early 1900s, reaching its peak all the way to 1960 at 3.11 gigatons as carbon. And as one of the most developed countries, this is far more than any other country almost. Third, Indigenous American erasure because of these climate impacts. Since many Native Americans rely on this and on the environment, as previously stated, the harm to the environment has many health effects to Native Americans, such as water-related illnesses like contaminating the water they drink on the reservation, food contaminations, and respiratory illnesses because of the contamination of the air that people pollute. For example, the Huma tribe in Louisiana depends heavily on the coast of Louisiana, where they hunt for fish, shrimp, mullets, etc. And they depend on this coast right here, but things such as oil spilling and other types of pollution hurts this environment, and in turn these native people have lost their resource and they no longer have that main source of food and resources that they once had. So in conclusion, it can be stated that because of post-settler colonization, Native American culture was once very much tied with nature and had deep respect for it, and all the practices were centered around sustaining and utilizing it to the best. But because of post-settler colonization and the industrialization during the given time period, the nature has been depleted, and the practices that Native Americans once had with the environment have been harmed and therefore affect Native people the most. Thank you. This is my work cited.
Yay. All right, I have two questions for you. What evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and then why didn't you use it?
I gathered evidence about another way they diminished Native culture, such as sending the Native American youth to boarding schools, but I didn't use it because it's not directly tied to the environment, which is what my main question was about, and I felt like it would just be a stretch to try to tie it in this presentation.
Okay, and if you had more time, what additional research would you do?
I would have definitely done more research about other sustainable practices that Native Americans did other than just the buffalo and hunting in general, like the dances or rituals that they did in respect to the environment, or prayers and sacrifices they made to show their appreciation towards nature.